Hey guys, so today I'm going to tell you about the leaders of the Soviet Union and Russia. So we decided to kind of put it in this little roller coaster because the Soviet Union kind of goes through these ups and downs during, their history. And so we've talked a lot about Joseph Stalin. Remember, he was a dictator and he is, controlling everything and ends up, killing millions of people based on the famine and his economic policies and agricultural policies. But then he's also going to get rid of a lot of opposition. But then other leaders that you probably don't know about, like who is Brezhnev besides him having these giant eyebrows, looks like two caterpillars crawling across his face. What else do we know about these people? Putin, you've probably heard of, who is the current leader in Russia at this time. But we're going to learn about some other ones. So I'm just going to kind of quickly go through these leaders, and I want you guys to kind of fill in those little yellow boxes as we go. So one thing I don't have, and I'm going to kind of be referring to this slide deck, but I don't have a specific slide for Stalin, so I'm just going to leave it on here and we'll kind of talk about him. And we know about Stalin. Hopefully you guys remember a little bit about him, but he had some different policies, like his 5-year plan, and his 5-year plan was, all about like, let's focus on agriculture and industrialization. Unfortunately, what he's going to do is he's going to have collective farming that kind of Lenin started. If you guys remember, it's where you're basically taking all these farms and the government's consolidating them and everybody has a job. And it's going to make a lot of people mad, especially those wealthy farmers, the kulaks, okay, right here, because they were benefiting from, more of a capitalist society where they were selling products and getting a profit for it. And so all of a sudden, when the government comes in and says, no, you need to, plant this and harvest this, and we're going to take this, and you're not going to get any of the profits from it. They didn't really like that. So they ended up killing their livestock and burning their crops, and it's going to create this huge famine. And, millions of people would end up dying because of that. Industrialization was another thing that Stalin wanted to focus on. And he wanted to become this big industrial power because they industrialized late. And so what's going to happen is going to put these really high expectations on industry and how much you have to produce and you have to do this. And so one of two things happened. Either people would lie on their production, which was never a good thing, or they would produce them so quickly that you would have really low quality goods. And so this is something that, Stalin struggled with, and that people were afraid to tell him because, well, having his reputation, they're probably going to end up in, a gulag, the labor camp. And so they were really nervous to tell him about, the lack of production or the low quality goods. And so everybody just kind of tried to pretend that everything was fine. In a way that he really controlled society was by censorship, just like all those other dictators that we have talked about. So Stalin's going to die. Now who? Who's going to take power? So then we go to Khrushchev. I'm going to kind of switch back over to this. So as I'm going through this, I want you guys to still kind of fill in these little yellow things, okay? So under Khrushchev, this is actually the highest part or the hottest part of the Cold War is during his reign, but we'll kind of talk about that in a second. So during Khrushchev, you're going to have a period of what's called de-Stalinization, basically where he wants to get rid of a lot of Stalin's policies. And so he's going to start to implement a little bit of capitalism, but still being a communist, but wants to give people a little bit more freedom. And so he starts helping them on their rent and, lowers rent so people can stay in their houses, and then also is giving them free healthcare and, finding people jobs and whatnot. And in theory, it looks really good. Unfortunately, what's going to happen is even though the government is going to help out, it's still going to be, not everybody is going to get the assistance they need, or you're going to wait in these extremely long bread lines and food lines to actually get the assistance you need, like 8 hours to get like a loaf of bread. And so it wasn't awesome, but kind of on paper, it looks pretty good. Now, like I said, we're going to reach the hottest part of the Cold War under Khrushchev. So if you guys remember when we talked about the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Cuban Missile Crisis happens during Khrushchev's when he's in power. And if you guys remember, this is when, the Soviet Union puts missiles in Cuba, kind of pointed at us, and we put missiles in Turkey, pointed at them. And it's this really, really tense time in United States history that we weren't, or just the Cold War history, that we weren't sure if anybody was gonna, push this button first. Come to find out, it's not really even a button, but you get what I'm saying. So it was a very, very tense time. Now, after Khrushchev, you're gonna have Brezhnev. Now, Brezhnev, the economy had kind of gone down under Khrushchev, and so Brezhnev in the beginning is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to totally help the economy and I'm going to, do everything I can to help the people. Well, come to find out that's not exactly what he does. And in fact, he's almost going to go kind of backwards to like what Stalin was like, where he's jailing critics. Hello, Stalin did that all the time. And, he really talked about like, how we need to limit our military and our nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, it's actually going to go the opposite direction. He's actually going to spend more money on the military and put more effort into building up nuclear weapons than anybody does. And so his big thing is like, we need to put troops in all of those Warsaw Pact nations, all those satellite states, all of the, all of our countries to make sure that, everything is staying how it's supposed to. Unfortunately, the economy is going to tank during this time. And you're going to, start to see some issues kind of roll around in all of these satellite nations. People are going to start realizing, like, do we have to be controlled by the Soviet Union? But really, that doesn't really, start to really play out until Gorbachev. And Mikhail Gorbachev, he is the last person in power until or before the Soviet Union falls. And so he is, and you can see that there's a little bit of a time between Brezhnev and Gorbachev, but I'm just not going to talk about them all. So Gorbachev, you look at Gorbachev and you kind of look at him and he's like the last, like Hail Mary, like let's try to save the Soviet Union. Now, he recognizes that there's no way we can kind of sustain the way what we've been doing. We can't, remain politically like this. We cannot, obviously our economy is not good at all. And so we really have to kind of make some changes. And so he is, starting to make these little reforms that I'll kind of talk about. But what's going to happen is those reforms are kind of like a little too late effort. And a lot of these Soviet nations, and I'm not just talking about like Russia, I'm talking about all of the nations that the Soviet Union has control of, all of those satellite states, all of the states that are right below Russia. Okay, so only imagine like here's Russia, but then you have all of these little states that are around it that the Soviet Union is essentially controlling. And so he starts to give some of these freedoms and reforms, and people in those nations and in Russia start to realize like we might be able to kind of push the Soviet Union out. Now, so he's going to really try to kind of ease these Cold War tensions. He's going to try to ease, these rebellions that start to go on. But unfortunately, what ends up happening is because of these two reforms, his glasnost, which is like openness, freedom of speech, freedom of elections, and all of a sudden you allow this freedom and people start talking, okay? And they start saying, well, maybe this isn't the type of government. Maybe this isn't the leader that we should have in power. Maybe the Soviet Union shouldn't be controlling us. Okay, so the moment that you allow people to talk, they're going to start talking. And so it just kind of starts this little ripple effect of like these, rebellions and things that go on. And another thing he's going to do is what's called perestroika, which is basically like restructuring, restructuring the economy, restructuring the government. He's going to kind of have like a decentralization where the government is not in control of everything. But again, once you allow that control to go, people now want to take take that control. And so what you end up having is you have start having the fall of the Soviet Union. It's going to start in the Balkans. Then there's going to be like this protest and this coup in Russia. Okay. And Boris Yeltsin, who's actually going to be the leader after Gorbachev, he's like, you know what? Nope, we're done. Like, Russia is pulling out of Soviet Union. And people are like, wait, is it Russia like the Soviet Union? Technically, the Soviet Union is made up of all those different countries. And so all of a sudden, like Yeltsin's like, we're done, we're out. And so Russia breaks free from the Soviet Union. And then all the other nations are like, we're out, like we're out. And so on December 25th, Merry Christmas, the Soviet Union, officially falls because all of these other nations start to just declare independence. So now let's look at Boris Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin, if like you had communism like over here, Boris Yeltsin's like on the complete opposite side. He like wants to go from communism to capitalism like that. And everybody kind of looking back at, the way he does everything, everybody's like, maybe you should have done it a little bit more gradually. And even his advisors were like, maybe we shouldn't do this that quickly. And he was like, nope, this is what I want to, be done. And so he did. And so he pretty much like does all these crazy things. He increases taxes. He cuts government subsidies. He, wants to, get rid of a lot of welfare. He wants the government to have less control over the people. Okay. So it changed way too quickly. In fact, there were so many problems that happened because of this. Huge corruption in the government. So many like crimes, violent crimes increased because people just were like, the government is not there. It's like you are just letting everybody be free and do what they want. Well, they haven't been free for so long that you have them kind of going crazy. And so it actually kind of goes the opposite of what he thinks is going to happen, which is help the economy. It's a huge downturn of the economy. And everybody is like, you've got to do something about this. Well, in comes Putin. So Putin is in power twice. Okay. So basically what's going to happen is he is going to be the prime minister, and then he is, as prime minister, he's just going to kind of surround himself with like corrupt people. My gosh, this is like Stalin all over. And just surround himself. So basically what ends up happening is like when he takes power, it's like everybody just elects him because he's just surrounded by all these people. Now he's also going to just surround him with these certain oligarchs, these very high ranking like families and people, and he's going to surround themselves, and so they're very influential. And so if like the oligarch doesn't agree with him, like, oh, you're jailed, like you're done. Sounds just like Stalin. And so when Putin takes power, you have a lot of just issues that are going to kind of come up. Inequality is going to increase like crazy. You're going to have major chaos and corruption. Then you're going to have the Chechnya crisis. Actually, he is not even in power when this happens, but basically you have some scuffles that's going to happen. Chechnya is like just the south of Russia, and you're going to have some issues, and then you're going to have like Russia and Chechnya, and they're going to be kind of like fighting. And there's going to be some, Russian cities that are going to be attacked, and Putin's going to go like, we have to do something about this. We have to do something about this. And people are like, yeah, we do. And so it's going to increase his popularity. And so what's going to happen is once Putin's first term is done, he can't actually go and like run for another term because you can only serve for 2 consecutive terms. Well, because you had Yeltsin stepped down when he was prime minister. Yeltsin stepped down because he had some heart issues. He became, the leader, and then he ran for another like first term, and so that's his 2 terms. And so during his second term, because once you had Medved's, he takes over after Putin. Putin ends up being Medved's prime minister, and then he pretty much just wins the presidency 4 years later pretty quickly. And then this is when his leadership really starts to turn, really increasing censorship, cracking down on human rights and human liberties, very aggressive foreign policy strategy. He's going to intervene in Ukraine, and he's going to intervene in a lot of different places. And one of the biggest thing that we know about Russia is their cyber army. And it's not just in the United States where he has intervened in our elections. It's happened in Europe a lot, and all these different European elections. And so they have a very, very good, what they call a cyber army, that are able to really support, right-wing sides and kind of push that agenda. And it's kind of crazy what they've been able to do. So Putin's not really a guy that you really want to trust, but you're also kind of scared to be on like the bad side of him. So I think it's definitely this like tiptoe point of what's that relationship you got to have. Okay, how far of a distance do you want to stay away? So just kind of going back to this again, we're gonna have just a roller coaster of leaders and a roller coaster of what's gonna happen. So hopefully you guys kind of got a little bit of information of why the Soviet Union and Russia are the way they are. So hopefully you found it somewhat entertaining. All right, have a good one.